Hello there. What is up? Sorry about the late notice. Or sorry about being late, I should say. We're still exhausted from last week, but it is Wednesday, October 10th, 2018, and this, my friends, this is the A-Side Live Chat Podcast, and my name is Shaun Al-Shatti. Thank you so much for joining us on this morning. I hope you've been having a wonderful day so far. I'm having a great day. It feels like it's been years since we've talked. So much has happened, and we will get into all of that today. But first, as we do around here, let me bring my co-host in here, the workhorse himself. There is no better way to start my day than with another round of Where in the World is Marc Raimondi. Last week, he was coming at you live from Las Vegas, and I have a feeling, as he does, he is not home right now. Marc, my man, how are things? Where are you this week?
I'm just never home anymore. I'm living out of a suitcase for the last month. I am in beautiful New York City at the Vox Media offices, getting ready for the Bellator doubleheader, because as if last week was not enough MMA, there are two Bellator. I can't talk. I'm done already. Just cut me loose. There are two big Bellator events this weekend: the Bellator Heavyweight World Grand Prix, Mitrione versus Bader, Sonnen versus Fedor. One is at Mohegan Sun up in Connecticut. One is out on Long Island, and the festivities kick off today, Shaun, for open workouts here in Manhattan. So keep posted to MMAfighting.com for all of that goodness, and hopefully I'll get some more coffee in me, and we can really get this show on the road.
Yeah, I need you caffeinated up, Marc. I need energy.
I need energy as well. It's coming. Don't worry. It's coming.
The people demand energy. Well, hey, the work never stops.
Sijara, where's my coffee at? Danny!
The work never stops. We all appreciate what you're doing out there for the Bellator shows. I'm sure you guys will bring us plenty of goodies from out there in New York this week. But as for today, I mean, we always say this is your guys' show, so we'll talk about whatever you want us to talk about. But I have a feeling I know what you guys want us to talk about. You can ask us a question on the MMA Fighting page below. Any question that gets 3 recs, those will turn green and get priority. Or you can ask us a question on Twitter using the hashtags TheASide and Chat Rappers. A replay of this podcast is going to be up immediately following the show on YouTube. Audio only version. I can't speak either. We're going up on SoundCloud and Stitcher, the usual. So with that, let's not waste any more time. I mean, let's get going and jump into these questions. Are you ready, Marc?
I was born ready. Born ready. Danny, where's my coffee? Danny!
All right. Well, hey, coming up first, this is from the MMA Fighting page. If it would load, it just won't load for me. It'll happen at some point.
I can start us off then.
No, there we go. I got it.
All right.
Why did Lewis get a title shot? And this is coming from loyal listener, the Empire 91. He writes, did the UFC book Derrick Lewis against DC because they think it will be competitive, or did they see the uptick in social media followers and decide to cash in? So this is the UFC 230 saga that seemingly will not end, Marc. We have been talking about this for months. It feels this is the latest chapter in an ongoing saga. What are your immediate thoughts? We're about 24 hours now away removed from the news. What are your takeaways from what happened yesterday?
Well, the answer to that question from the comments is both. The reason is both of those things. First thing I want to say about Derrick Lewis is that the timing may be a little bit weird, and I understand the criticism of the timing and why it's happening and the relative short notice to UFC 230. But the one thing that I will argue is that Derrick Lewis 100% deserves a title shot. He's won 9 of 10. He's knocking fools out left and right. He just knocked out Volkov in a fight that many people thought could have been a title eliminator. So as far as Derrick Lewis deserving a title shot, there is no doubt. There are people who have deserved title shots far fewer than and have gotten title shots. So I don't buy that. I definitely think that he deserves to be in there with DC. But yes, the timing is very strange. And of course, Derrick Lewis cut the all-time promo after UFC 229, his win against Alexander Volkov with Joe Rogan. I mean, everyone is talking about this man. His Instagram jumped up double. I think he's over 1 million on Instagram now.
Yeah, he is.
I mean, the guy is just absolute gold when you put a microphone in front of his face. And we've talked about being on a Conor McGregor card, and it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to become a star. Well, for Derrick Lewis, it did, because the mainstream people, the casual fans, were watching UFC 229, and he did that to Volkov, coming back after getting really his butt kicked for 3 straight rounds to close in the final seconds with the knockout. And then he took off his shorts in the octagon, and when asked, Derrick, why'd you take your shorts off? He said, because my balls was hot. How can you argue with this man? I don't care. Give him the welterweight title shot. He can fight Khabib next. He can do whatever he wants after that performance and that work on the mic. Derrick Lewis for president, Shaun. Derrick Lewis for president.
Preach, man. It's funny because getting back, I feel like we get into our own little weird world when we're in Las Vegas or wherever for these trips, right? And it's all so insulated. And then you get back out on Sunday to home and you realize like, oh yeah, other people saw this as well. And it was funny because, obviously this was a big one. None of my friends care about MMA or my family or anybody in my life really cares about MMA. But this was one that people were watching just because it was such a big event. It was a spectacle. And it was funny because the first thing I got asked when I got home, obviously was the brawl. But literally the second thing from every single person I talked to was, yo, what about Derrick Lewis? Tell me about this Derrick Lewis guy. Like, I think what you were saying about the Conor card, the effect of a Conor card, being on a Conor card and having a really good performance on one, it doesn't always translate, but it definitely did. It definitely did. And this one, and also, I feel like this is one of the rare occasions where the UFC like actively was pretty obviously influenced by fan opinion. Just when it comes to the fight that Derrick Lewis versus DC replaced, because I don't think they expected a positive reaction for Valentina Shevchenko versus Sijara Eubanks, but I think the reaction they got was even more negative than they ever possibly expected or imagined. Like it was such a tidal wave of overwhelming negativity after everything that fans had been through with UFC 230 and this main event question, that it felt as though, we were on the ground last week. It felt as though they were looking desperately for something to take its place. We talked to a couple people over that week who said as much, that this wasn't over yet and they were looking for something. And I think they really saw their opportunity with Derrick Lewis because, like you said, in a vacuum, he is a credible challenger. He's won 9 of 10 at heavyweight, which is close to impossible to do. Very few people, if anybody, really wins 9 of 10 at heavyweight. And he really is just riding an incredible wave of momentum from this past week, scoring the best moment of his career, basically, at a time when the most eyes were on the sport. Like you said, his Instagram followers, I think, are like above 1 million now, which is crazy for just a random UFC heavyweight. Like, that's bigger than most followings of most champions.
Derrick Lewis is a draw. He's a draw.
Yeah, man. And I also I don't like the timing in terms of, obviously he took a one-sided beating from Alexander Volkov until the finishing blow. I think he suffered like 130 strikes over the course of that fight. That's a lot of trauma to take from a Russian giant and then turn it right around and fight again another month against the champion. But given the back issues that he has and also like how long he's been doing this, I feel like this is the hottest he will ever be. And this would really, he's a fun personality people like, and the UFC just struck while the iron was hot.
You got to strike while the balls are hot, Shaun. While the balls are hot. And to your point, let's move on to the next question from Greb77 from the MMAfighting.com comments. It's about that turnaround for Lewis. Everybody loves Derrick Lewis, and the UFC obviously were desperate to book a proper main event for the MSG card. But is it really a good idea to send Lewis back in the cage 4 weeks after his tough fight with Volkov? He took over 100 shots from a top 5 heavyweight. He has a fractured hand. He has major back issues. He seemed to have problems with his orbital. He said he wasn't ready for a 5-round title fight, and you were still going to put him up against arguably the best heavyweight of all time. What are your thoughts? A couple things, Shaun, before I kick it to you. I don't know where the fractured hand comes from because that wasn't in the medical suspensions.
No, it wasn't.
It was just he was suspended until November 6th, I believe, for a tough fight. So nothing about an orbital bone, nothing about a fractured hand. So I'm not sure where that came from. Maybe it was hurting him after the fight, but from after his medicals, none of that stuff came up that it could be broken or anything. So it was really just a usual suspension. I think it's a 30-day, right? 30-day suspension for a tough fight.
Yeah, it was 30 days.
What do you think? Is this a little bit too much for Derrick Lewis going against Daniel freaking Cormier, the champ, in 4 weeks after that beating they took against Volkov?
I'll add on to what you just said. That suspension runs to November 6th. So a couple people have asked me, how can he even fight? Because that's past the day. With those kind of suspensions, you can get it overturned by a doctor. Basically, if you get cleared by a doctor, they'll just say, okay, you're good to go. So I think that's all Derrick Lewis has to do at the moment. But it does give me a little pause. I won't lie, just because again, this is a game of damage and brain trauma, and he just took a lot of it on Saturday. But I feel like there is, with a guy like Derrick Lewis, who's a fun fighter, a fun personality again that people like. This is jumping on, striking while the iron is hot, and the stylistic pairing may favor DC a lot. But Derrick Lewis is at this point someone who we have seen over and over and over again that, hey, maybe he gets tired, but he is dangerous forever. It doesn't matter how his gas tank could be at 0, and he is still the most dangerous man on the planet. That knockout on Saturday was one of the more ridiculous things I've ever seen. And so I feel like people are already equating this fight a little bit to the Daniel Cormier's 2 fights against Rumble Johnson. And I can see where they're coming from on that. Just, big a big knockout artist who gets tired with wrestling. But Derrick Lewis just really has this supernatural power, man. This supernatural power to have that one-hitter quitter no matter how tired he gets. How many times have we seen this man summon the power of Thor in the later rounds despite just being completely gone? So I dig the fight ultimately. If you're giving overall thoughts, there's a little worry there, but I like the matchup. It's a fun matchup. I like getting DC back. I like the fight all around.
Yeah, I mean, I have a little bit of a hard time with it because of that danger aspect. You don't want to see a damaged Derrick Lewis go into a fight with a very dangerous guy in Daniel Cormier. With that being said, this is the opportunity of Derrick Lewis's career. He may not get another opportunity like this. And it's DC, it's MSG. He's more popular than ever, so I understand why they're doing it. They needed a main event, so from a UFC perspective, it's a no-brainer. And for Derrick Lewis, it's like, yeah, he may be a little bit banged up. Also, DC is a little bit banged up. His hand is still injured from the Miocic fight in July. Yeah. So, look, I mean, I think Derrick Lewis has a tough road to hoe, so to speak, on November 3rd in MSG. But
I see what you did there. I
don't know what you're talking about. But I mean, yeah, I do. I was excited when I heard for the fight because it's fun. I mean, those guys are going to be, that lead up is going to be hilarious. I mean, the videos that have already come out just in the last 24 hours, some fan made, some not, have been fantastic. I mean, Derrick Lewis said he doesn't like DC because he disrespected Popeye's chicken. I mean, this is gold, and we went from such a serious build up to a fight, I mean, criminal acts were being committed in the McGregor Khabib lead up, and now we're just getting 2 guys who are going to be sportsmen and have fun with it and entertain. I think I like it. I can't help but to enjoy it.
Yeah, I like what you just mentioned because that's something I hadn't considered, but that's very true. Like where we just came from a lead up that was so vitriolic, so venomous. And now to go into one where the rivalry is basically predicated around Popeye's chicken, like that's fantastic. I think it's a nice change of pace. And I urge any of you guys watching this who haven't seen that fan made promo that Derrick Lewis posted on Instagram. Maybe one of my favorite things ever. It's using Inception music with the Popeye's chicken thing. It's fantastic. But let's move on. We got a lot to get to today, so we're moving on to the next question coming from Abdul Riff on MMA Fighting, who asked about rumors the UFC might shut down the flyweight division. He writes, this barely got any attention last week, which is understandable, but you have a couple guys, for example, Dominick Cruz and Chael Sonnen, who are claiming the UFC might shut down the flyweight division. Dana White also said last week that TJ versus Cejudo was next, but at bantamweight. Is the UFC working on shutting down flyweight, or are these rumors premature? Have you guys heard anything about this?
Yeah, I mean, I have heard a few things about it, and I started hearing about it last week. Actually, I was talking to Sergio Pettis last week at Media Day, and he brought up the fact that the UFC has been talking about possibly getting rid of the flyweight division, which is something that I feel like they've been talking about here and there, kind of under the surface for the last few years. And now maybe with Demetrius Johnson having lost, this is their opportunity to kind of swoop in and get rid of it and move all those guys up to bantamweight. I think it would be unfortunate. I think that the division has a lot of great athletes, and I think that there are a lot of skillful fighters in that division. And the ones who will move up, they're going to be at a disadvantage. A lot of them. Some of them do cut a lot of weight, and they'd be fine at bantamweight. But a good amount of them are going to be someone like a Jared Brooks, for instance, would be at a major disadvantage against a 35er who is probably cutting from 150, 155, maybe even more than that. So it is unfortunate. I'm not sure exactly what is going to happen. I hope it doesn't happen. but it does seem like there are. I mean, usually there is smoke when there's smoke, there's fire when it comes to this kind of stuff, and it seems like there actually is some legitimate talk about this. But I hope it's not true.
Yeah, I was actually with you when we were discussing it about one point last week. I've heard rumblings on this too, and I feel like that picked up a lot last week as well. And like you said, where there's smoke, there's often fire. I do think it's a little premature to say that it's actually going to happen. Neither of us actually know that. But I feel like this has been a discussion that's been around the UFC for a couple of years now. If you remember, I can't remember which fight it was, but there was a DJ disagreement with UFC where it came out that at one point it was like almost threatened that they will shut down the flyweight division. It feels like that's a very flippant thing to say unless you actually intend to do it. There's not much more I can add right now, but I definitely have heard rumbles just like you have, and I agree with you. I think it would be an unfortunate thing because obviously there's a lot of fighters who really that is their natural weight class, and they would be kind of left out in the cold and having to deal with fighting much bigger men at 35. But I will say how many years are we now at flyweight, right? I think 4, 5, 6, something like that.
I want to say 6, right?
Yeah, that feels right. It feels like it hasn't caught on, man. It feels like it hasn't caught on ever. I don't know that it will at this point. It feels like the UFC is waiting for this to actually catch fire. And I almost wonder if they're giving up on it, especially like you said, now that Demetrius Johnson has lost. But nothing's happened yet, and obviously nothing's like immediately in the discussion. So I don't know that there's much more to add.
Yeah, we can't really talk about all this a whole lot because we just don't know enough about it. Nothing has actually come to fruition yet. So we'll move on to Danko Libre from the MMAfighting.com comments.
Nice
Lightweight, indeed. Lightweight wrestlers. Khabib is clearly on another level when it comes to grappling. Who in the lightweight division has the most elite American wrestling background to give Khabib a competitive matchup?
Yes, this fight. So let's talk about this fight, right? Because this was one of the more incredible spectacles I've ever seen. And actually it went very similar to how I ended up calling it in the preview show, I will say, although that's not special. Anybody who picked Khabib expected it to go that way. I was impressed with Conor, just his general amount of takedown defense. He did well. We've seen guys like Edson Barboza and Michael Johnson just get straight drowned out there. He at least was able to put up some level of a fight. I feel like people malign his takedown defense and wrestling a little too much. Khabib's just on a different level though, man. And I feel like he's going to be champion for a while. That was actually, I add that with a caveat. But that was just an incredibly dominant performance. And it almost is unfortunate that the Brawl has overshadowed that, because I feel like had the Brawl not happened the last 3 days, all anybody talks about it is how that was just a legendarily dominant performance by Khabib. His wrestling is going to be something for people to have to deal with in this division, man. And I don't know who that person is. I don't know if that person exists. I don't know if that person is in the sport right now. But 3 people came to mind instantly when you read this question to me. One is Kevin Lee. Fantastic wrestling defense. Also just generally a super strong son of a bitch. I feel like just some level of inherent strength you have to possess to be able to just deal with the pressure, the constant pressure that Khabib puts on you. I mean, we even saw it against McGregor in that first round. He didn't really even throw any strikes. He's just spent the whole first round putting all of his weight on Conor and just making Conor carry that weight and just sapping him for 5 minutes so that when he came out in the second, he was a little more tired. Kevin Lee would be one. I would really be interested to see that. He also really wants that fight. Anybody who really wants to fight Khabib, I want to see them fight Khabib, because that's not a fight I would ever want if I was a fighter. Justin Gaethje is another one that would be interesting to me. I don't think that's one that people would maybe automatically assume, but that would be interesting just given to me his wrestling credentials and also mostly his pressuring style, because I feel like Conor and fighters in general do their best when they're walking Khabib down. And that's what Justin does. That's all Justin does. So I would like to see that, how Khabib handles that. And, even though we've never seen it, Justin is a tremendously strong wrestler. He just always has that in his back pocket. But the one I am coming back to always and forever, and you know where I'm going already, Marc Raimondi, ultimately my answer goes back to Tony Ferguson. He is a wrestler through and through, underrated credentials there. But most importantly, and the most fascinating thing of all to me, is how he works off of his back. He is the most creative and dangerous person off his back of anybody I can think of in the UFC. His elbows are actual legitimate weapons in there. He carries weapons in there in a way that few fighters do. I mean, there was a photo I posted on Sunday. It was put together by someone from our MMA, the Reddit MMA side, who just put together a little collection of Tony's last 6 opponents that he had fought and like sort of their faces afterwards. And all of them were bloodied and cut up and just crazy looking. And it looked like all the defeated character sprites from Street Fighter. Like, it was just a collection of these defeated character sprites. It was crazy to see, man. Tony Ferguson catches subs from every position. He's squirmy. He escapes with super unorthodox ways. We even saw it. This isn't an escape from the bottom, but we even saw it when he got rocked by Anthony. His first move was to front roll away from Anthony Pettis while he's rocked. Like, who the hell does that? He is just so unorthodox in so many different ways. And more than anything, he just really, we saw this against Kevin Lee. He makes you work for every second that you're on top of him. It is never easy when you are on top of Tony Ferguson. I think that would be a fascinating challenge to Khabib stifling pressure. And I really hope we get that fight. I don't want the rematch with Conor, at least not yet. I need Tony Ferguson versus Khabib in my life, and I need it now.
Ferguson really is like a real video game. He's like a real life video game in there. It's just like he's button mashing. It's ridiculous. Like, get hit, forward roll. Amazing. They're not in the lightweight division, but I want to add 2 names to that list. And maybe one of them will be in the lightweight division at some point soon. George St. Pierre is someone who I'd like to see Khabib match up with, wrestling for wrestling. Of course, GSP doesn't have that traditional, classic American folk style wrestling background, but man, if his MMA wrestling is not some of the best we've ever seen. And then one more person, Ben Askren, not a lightweight, but would be a fascinating matchup of wrestling to see those two go head to head. So those are 2 names that I throw in. But Kevin Lee would be the name in the lightweight division that I would say.
That Askren matchup, that hadn't occurred to me. That's a good one. I would really love to see that.
That would be really fascinating. Really fascinating. Can we just get Askren in the damn UFC? There are so many interesting matchups for the guy.
Do you think Askren can make 65?
Yeah, he doesn't
cut that much.
Well, he did move up when he was in 1.
Yeah, but that was just because of 1's weight classes. That's not really move it up.
He possibly could make 65, but I mean, I think he's good at 70. I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting, really, really interesting matchups for Askren in the UFC.
Agreed. What's next?
What do we got? What we got from the well, we'll touch on this very briefly. From the MMAfighting.com, comments from Eduardo Bueno. How blind you must be to score a 28-28 after 3 rounds Saturday. I guess from our friend Brett Okamoto from ESPN. Please, guys, stop being so dumb about Conor. 90% of MMA media are just fanboys.
Okay, so I'll jump in real quick because I know where you want to take this. Let's do that later. This question is basically asking me to defend Brett Okamoto's scorecard.
Defend, or I guess Brett had Conor winning the first round.
So I can't talk about Brett. I don't know. I had Conor losing the first round and then losing the second round with a 10-8. So yes. I had Conor winning the third round, and I think going to the final, the ultimate finishing round, I had it 29-27. I think that's how math works. So that's how I'll say. I'm not gonna be asked to defend Brett Okamoto's scorecard. I don't know what you want me to do there.
I mean, I look, when you're in the Brett was I believe Brett was press row, right? He was down there with you, right? Or was he in the back doing ESPN stuff?
I think he actually might have been in the back, but I could be wrong, so I don't want to say one way or the other.
Gotcha. Anyway, in the moment when you're watching, whether it's on a screen or in the arena, sometimes you miss stuff. But yeah, most people had Khabib winning that first round. Look, Brett is
he laid on him.
Obviously, a friend of ours, and we're not gonna bury the guy. He fucked up. It happens. So whatever.
Yeah. Moving on. This is coming from Lucian, loyal listener on the MMA Fighting page. I guess this is more of the same, so maybe we'll touch on this briefly. Khabib's domination of McGregor. I hope the two of you had a delightful week despite all the craziness. Thank you, Lucian. Watching the Khabib-Conor fight and reading the analysis afterwards, felt like a lot of the analysts and MMA media were almost shocked by how utterly Khabib dominated McGregor. I don't feel like anybody was shocked, and kept trying to pass it off as a grand strategy from McGregor. The best example of this was when Dominick Cruz, who I respect tremendously, tried to explain that it had to be part of Conor's plan, and when Khabib was smashing him there in the second round. Do you feel that I am being fair in my perception there, and how surprised were you about how one-sided the fight was? This is kind of more of the same question. I guess I'm not really understanding where this is coming from. I don't know that I've heard a lot of people saying Conor did well in there at all. I feel he really got messed up. But I obviously wasn't able to hear the commentary. I was in the arena. Was Cruz, Marc, you were able to hear the commentary. Was Cruz being very pro Conor?
I didn't feel that way in the moment. What's very interesting about this fight, Shaun, is I feel like there seems to be as much analysis about what the media is saying about the fight than the actual fight itself. For whatever reason, people are really thinking they're taking a fine-tooth comb to what the media is saying and the analysis. But I don't recall Cruz being overly pro McGregor. I thought that sometimes I think that when there is an expectation of how a fight is going to go, and I think many people, probably Cruz included, when you think that something's going to happen and it doesn't quite happen the way you think it is, you almost kind of sway your commentary toward the other side because you're surprised. Remember that's the whole thing about when the DJ Cejudo thing that we talked about a few months ago. It's like Cejudo did way better than anyone thought he did, and I thought DJ won that fight. I thought DJ did enough on the scorecards to win. But people, in many ways, I feel like when people saw Cejudo doing better than people thought, they were thinking that he won rounds when really DJ was doing just as well, if not better, to win rounds. So I think in this case, you think Khabib might just steamroll Conor, and when that doesn't quite happen, when Conor does mount some decent defense some of the time, you kind of go the other way, and you're like, whoa, Conor's doing all right. Conor's actually doing pretty well. When if you just look at it kind of straight down the middle, you can see it from a fair perspective. You know what I mean? Does that make any sense?
Sure. No, that makes sense. But ultimately, though, like Conor, there are very few redeeming facets from that fight for him. Like he got dominated in the grappling. He got dropped in the striking, which I didn't see coming. I don't think you saw that coming. There are very few positives for him ultimately to take out of that fight, other than maybe he made a ton of money. I would say that's about it.
I would say the positive is that he, in the third round, had an opportunity on the feet to do something, but he just could not capitalize on it. It was like,
how is that a positive?
Because he actually wasn't getting completely steamrolled in the wrestling and grappling in that third round. That was like bars. The window.
They're very low bars.
Right? Yeah. No, exactly. But he won the third. He did win the third round. But it's like when you think of Conor McGregor standing up all that time in the third round and not really doing any significant damage to Khabib, it's like, wow. If you're a McGregor fan, it's like you had what you wanted in that third round, right? He had the chance. He had the opportunity. Khabib was standing there with him. And yeah, he won the round and he landed, but he didn't that was not the McGregor left hands that we've seen that just floors people. I mean, it barely did any damage to Khabib. So I don't know if that was just kind of
he was exhausted, right? Man.
Yeah, it was
utterly exhausted at that point.
Right. It was more that was more like McGregor in the fourth round against Diaz.
Yeah.
Where it was he really couldn't do significant damage to Nate, but he was doing enough striking wise to win the round. But if you're a McGregor fan, like, and you see that in the third round, it has to be like frustrating. Like, oh my God, this is what he wants. This is where he needs the fight to be. Khabib's not even going for takedowns. He's landing and he's throwing and it's a good round, but it's not anywhere near what he needed to do to win the fight.
All right, let's keep it going.
Death Squad from the MMAfighting.com comments. Is Sijara Eubanks' anger justified? Going from headlining MSG for a title against an all-time great in Shevchenko to being without an opponent at all while having a signed contract. This seems like the UFC's new modus operandi when it comes to fight booking.
Nice pronunciation. I like that. What a 2-week span for Sijara Eubanks, right? She goes from fighting Jessica Ai on probably an undercard fight to all of a sudden headlining MSG in a title fight for her second UFC fight against Valentina Shevchenko, to all the way back to maybe basically not having a fight. I don't know that the Ai fight is booked yet again. That's running the gamut on the full UFC experience. And Sijara Eubanks really got it early in her career. She's, again, this is only her second fight, and she's already experienced how much the UFC really just doesn't care about you, frankly. Like that, like if we're being honest, that's what this is, right? And so I can certainly understand from her perspective, her anger. For a week, she believed she was not only getting a title fight, but she was headlining the most famous arena in the world. The noise behind it, all the rest of it, that doesn't matter. The complaints, she doesn't care about that. The facts were that she could tell her loved ones that on this date, she was going to do this incredible historic thing, only for that to really just get ripped away with like a quickness on a whim, really, without even, I mean, I don't know for a fact because I haven't been able to talk to her, but it felt like the UFC didn't really consult her about it. I mean, she was still talking on Twitter about it to fans for a while yesterday after the rest of the world sort of already knew that the fight that DC had been made, DC Lewis. So that being said, I mean, though her complaints, in my opinion, are entirely valid, the whole "you're playing with my life" thing, like that's very understandable. It is also true that she was perfectly cool with the situation when she did the exact same thing to Joanna Jędrzejczyk and the UFC ripped a fight out from underneath her on a whim. That exact scenario happened to Joanna to help out Sijara, and Sijara was super on board with it. And so to me, this is the most telling example that you could possibly ask for of why a fighters union will never, ever happen in this entire game. It is a selfish game, is a dog-eat-dog game. What is bad for one person is good, is just an opportunity for another. And, you know, I don't know if Sijara is working a second job on the side, if she has a side job. I wouldn't be surprised if she is, because I would assume she's on an entry-level UFC contract from Tough. But they keep these fighters focused on the carrot to the point where they won't realize how much they're getting screwed until it literally happens to them, even when they're the ones doing the screwing. And so it's an unfortunate situation all around. And it teaches, I mean, it's unfortunate that it teaches her so early in her UFC career that, again, the UFC just doesn't care about you. But man, we've talked about this for years. And at this point, like, I'm pretty done harping on it. Like, this is what you're going to have to deal with unless you unionize. And it seems like media wants it more than fighters. And that's fine. But this is what you're going to have to deal with. And increasingly, it seems like you're going to have to deal with it because contracts in 2018 mean less than they ever have, ever. The UFC can hold you to your side of it, but they can rip yours up the moment that they need to. So I don't know, man. This is just the game at this point. And unless they want to do something about it, they're going to have to keep dealing with this. Sign those Project Spearhead cards, y'all.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel for Sijara Eubanks because she thought she was the headliner, like you said, of Madison Square Garden, and she's been tweeting about it now for a week, and just like that, it gets taken away. And yeah, I don't even think they told her. I think that she probably found out on the internet, like every one of us did from Brett Okamoto's reporting. Now, I don't feel too bad because she was the product of the same UFC games that pulled her out of the main event of MSG. She did not get the MSG main event because she's been working long and hard in her UFC career and she has 10 straight wins or 8 straight wins. She's 3-2 as a fighter. She arguably maybe deserves a title shot in the 125-pound division, but she did earn that title shot through the Ultimate Fighter last year, and she had a terrible weight cut and she had to go to the hospital and she missed that fight. So she had the chance, and look, again, weight cutting is horrible. And it was a very tough weight cut, and she had tough weight cuts on Tough leading into last December's Tough finale. So she wasn't able to fight Nico Montano on that card. Basically what I'm saying is she benefited from the UFC playing games with Nate Diaz and Dustin Poirier, using their own leverage against Nate and Dustin to say, hey, we talked about this last week. Hey, we can put anything as the main event. We don't need you guys to be the main event. You have no leverage over us. That's what the UFC was basically saying to them. And now because Derrick Lewis he took his shorts off at UFC 229, Daniel Cormier took his shorts off when he saw that was a possible opponent. And here we are with a real main event. And just as soon as the UFC gave Sijara Eubanks that title shot, that spot, they took her out of that title shot in that spot to put Lewis and DC in there. And that's just what the UFC does. Fighters are pawns. You know, they're just parts on the board. They're not they're not treated like real people. We know they're real people, of course, but that's how it goes. So I do feel bad. I think she was naive to all this. I think that, I think that she felt like this was her opportunity and this was her chance. And I think that she probably felt like she earned it. Again, she did earn the title shot last year and it didn't work out. And I think that she's a very good fighter. She's a legitimate, incredible BJJ black belt. She's a fantastic athlete. And I think her time will come. But in some ways, I almost feel like maybe this is better off, because let's say she does go into the MSG main event against Shevchenko, the co-main event, which it's not going to be now, but we thought it was going to be Poirier versus Diaz. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Jesus. So that what would have happened basically is everyone would have come. They would have watched the fight. They would have watched Diaz versus Poirier, and then when that fight was over, a lot of them were going to leave the building, unfortunately, because look. MSG, we talked about it. The MSG main events the last few years were McGregor versus Alvarez, GSP versus Bisping. That is a big money event. That is an arena that only has some of the biggest money fights that the UFC has done over the last few years. And it was weird seeing Shevchenko versus Eubanks against them. All respect to them. They're both great fighters. But if we're being honest, this is still a business. And in order to be the main event of a show at Madison Square Garden, you need to draw business. And Shevchenko and Eubanks don't draw business. They don't. They're great fighters. They don't draw business. This is still an entertainment product. And DC and Lewis will draw better business, and that's why this is happening. And the whole thing is just a complete mess. And it all started from the UFC playing games with Diaz and Poirier, who aren't even on the card now, probably at UFC 230. So let's just throw up our hands and say, what the F?
Oh, man. Whoever writes the book about UFC 230 one day, that's going to be like a 50-chapter book. It's unbelievable at this point.
I'm exhausted.
All right, let's go on. So this question comes from Lodovic on the MMA fighting page. And once again, this is the same exact basic question, but we're going to actually address it this time. UFC 229 media coverage. He writes, I'm a huge fan of this site and especially this show. Thank you for that. We appreciate that. But I felt like the coverage, this is all in bold too. The coverage of this event was not very objective and sometimes a little confusing. And he goes point by point saying, I'm going to summarize this because it's very long. After the first press conference, Luke Thomas on his own channel called Conor a genius for how he acted. But then on the post-fight show said, what do you expect when you let all this happen? Chuck said Khabib lost the mental game after the second press conference. And the entire comment section called him out for that. And then the last point is after the fight, it was only in the comment section where he found the information that in bold, Conor actually threw the first punch in the cage before he was attacked. I missed any article discussing this deeper. What is going on? Some people even speculate here that you are favoring Conor because you're making money off of him. I believe in your integrity, but I still feel the coverage was favoring Conor quite a bit. And I'd like to hear your take on the topic. Thanks. So I'll let you go first, Marc.
Oh, gee, thanks. I appreciate that, Shaun.
I'll go first. You want me to go first?
No. First of all. And the bold is, of course, Ludovic's emphasis. The coverage of this event was not very objective. Do fans think that they're objective? Do fans think they're objective? Who's supposed to be objective here? Fans are not objective. Fans are fans. Fans are fans of individual fighters and athletes, and that's fine. That's what they're there for. But it's hard to come at a journalist for saying that you're not objective when fans inherently are not objective. They're just not. They see things the way they want to see them, and a lot of times, and I think this is a very good example, they've already made up their mind about what happened before they even saw what happened. They've already formed that narrative before the events unfolded. Now, I can't speak to Luke Thomas. I'm not Luke Thomas, obviously. Look at me. I'm not Luke Thomas.
You fooled me.
I can't speak for Chuck Mindenhall, who was really just giving his opinion. And by the way, on that same show in which we reacted to the press conference, you, Shaun, gave the opposite opinion. So, I mean, should everyone just have the same opinion here? What are we saying here? And then finally, this whole thing, man, my head is about ready to pop off. This whole Conor threw the first punch thing, man. I've gotten so many tweets. Conor threw the first punch. I mean, look, yeah, he threw a punch. Guess what? You think the guy that was jumping on the cage had good intentions? You think he was going to come hug Conor to congratulate him for a great fight? No. Dude had bad intentions. Dude was getting into it. It was already a brawl. Khabib had already jumped into Conor's corner, igniting a brawl, igniting a riot. You think Khabib's teammate was jumping on the cage because he wanted to say hello and give him a handshake and a pat on the back? Jolly good show, sir. No, dude had bad intentions. He was either going to jump into the fracas that was going on in the corner, or he was going to hit McGregor himself. It was already chaos. It was already a brawl. Dude shouldn't have been in the cage in the first place. So yeah, McGregor throws a punch. Is he supposed to just let the guy go at him or let the guy go at his team? It was already a brawl. The shit was already going down. Shit was already going down. What is he supposed to do? I mean, look, yeah, he threw the first punch. Maybe he escalated the situation, but things were already at a fever pitch. And also in the aftermath, when this was all going on, and I see a lot of people were getting heat. Karen Bryant was talking about this. Megan O'Leary was talking about this. They got a lot of heat from Khabib fans for not objectively reporting what happened. In the heat of the moment, when this thing just happened a few minutes ago, even on the post-fight show that you guys did after UFC 229, we have not looked at all the angles. It's live coverage. It's immediate. And now I've seen all the angles. And you know what else I saw? I saw a camera angle that might have shown dude from Khabib's team grabbing McGregor's leg and trying to pull him off the cage before the punch came. So look at that angle. Yeah, McGregor threw the first punch. That doesn't mean he started the whole freaking riot. Are you guys crazy? Are you guys crazy? Come on now with this. It was already a damn brawl. Shit was going down. All right, I'm done.
You're turning very red, and I enjoy it.
I feel like Dana. I'm turning Dana White red right now.
It's GoofCon level 5 all over the place over on your side. I love it. You're turning all red. So you got your. I want to address basically the exact same thing you just addressed. I'm gonna go by this point by point, just like you did. So this is hilarious.
I didn't go point by point. I just went total Tony Ferguson stream of consciousness. I'm surprised I didn't bring up Ninja Turtles and Chatman Can Do.
Okay. Chatman Can Do for life. So first point, right? The Luke Thomas called Conor a genius on his own. Man, I'm not Luke Thomas. What do you want from me? And we're asked to give our opinion about things that happen immediately. If the opinion is something you don't like, I'm sorry, but that's Luke's opinion. I can only give you my own opinion. Second thing, the Chuck saying Khabib lost the mental game. If you remember, I very vigorously argued against that. I said Khabib won the press conference in the moment. It was a back and forth between me and him. I was saying the entire time that Khabib won the press conference. I disagreed with him completely on that. Also, I picked Khabib, and I generally spoke extremely highly of him the entire week. It feels as though, and I love you guys. You guys are my family. I love everyone out there, but it feels as though certain fans just pick out what they want to hear what they want to hear, and then paint the entire media with that brush. And it's a little weird. I'm not going to say it's unfair because who cares what's fair? I don't know. But it's a little weird, but I understand it. I mean, I am a basketball fan when I am not an MMA journalist, and I do the same thing where if somebody's talking shit about the Suns, I think, oh, they hate the Suns when maybe they're just giving their opinion. I understand. But having me out here defending Chuck's bag takes that I agreed with in the actual moment, I'm not going to do that. As for the Conor throwing the first punch thing, yeah, man, I can't extrapolate much more than you already did, Mark. But yeah, sure, Conor threw the first punch after watching the guy who just fucked him up scale over the cage and then throw a flying Liu Kang kick straight into his corner and start fucking up his teammates. It's weird that people that are bringing up the Conor thing are not mentioning that part because, it's a pretty big part to all this. Like he jumped over the cage and was starting to brawl with Conor's teammates right after fucking up Conor. Like in general, there's enough blame to go around. I don't know why this is being singled out in that respect by some fans. No one is innocent. Not Conor. Certainly not Khabib. Certainly not the UFC, who played with fire in this promotion of this fight the entire time. And they're in continued allowance of letting Conor do whatever the hell he wanted without actually getting punished led to this. Because if you're Khabib and you've watched this from afar, and I understand he's from Northern Caucasus region, totally different culture, honor society, all of that. But you've watched this dude do whatever he wants for a year, 2 years, attack this ref over in Bellator, personally insult everything you stand for, attack the bus that you're on in an incident that leads to multiple people losing their fight, that leads to him, being in jail briefly, and no punishment comes down. I can 100%, and not only does no punishment come down, but it's almost encouraged, right? With all these promos with the Dolly incident and everything like that. I can 100% understand where Khabib's coming from at that point, because you are justice incarnate in his head. He is justice incarnate in that very moment. And if no one is willing to take matters into their hands, he is going to take it into his own hands, do what no one else will. I can understand where everybody's coming from in this thing. So this weird narrative that the media is refusing to talk about Conor throwing the first punch is hilarious to me. I'm sorry.
There are no victims in this whole thing. They're all knuckleheads. Khabib, Conor, the UFC. The tone was set for what happened after UFC 229 when McGregor and dozens of goons from Ireland stormed the loading dock of Barclays Center and Conor threw a dolly through a bus window, which was a criminal act. The man was arrested for it. It was a criminal act. The man was arrested for. People were trying to say, like, well, what's worse? I don't know what's worse. I know that Conor committed a crime objectively in the city of New York, which I'm sitting in right now. The man committed a crime. He threw a dolly through a bus window. Fighters were injured. 2 fighters couldn't make their fights a few days later. That was what set the tone for this whole thing. So Conor is certainly no victim in all of this. He ignited it. He threw kerosene on the freaking fire. And that's what happened. And the one thing that I will say about this, actually not the one thing, because I've already said a whole damn lot about this, but one more thing that I'll add to it is that Conor McGregor, I think, is promoting fights. Conor's team, I believe, is promoting fights. Habib's team?
They're not promoting
fights, dog. They are dead, stone cold serious. They are not people to mess around with. This is not fun and games. There is nothing fun and games about Khabib and his crew. They are stone cold serious. And you saw that. You saw that on Saturday night. They are not messing around. That's a tough group of dudes.
I agree with you. Is there anything else you want to add before we move on?
I don't know.
Very fired up.
Danny, where's my coffee? Danny.
You still haven't gotten that coffee?
Danny Segura, where you at?
Come on, Danny. Okay, so let's move on. Let's move on to non-Conor related things for like a half a second. Dizzy Dorf, loyal listener on MMA Fighting, asks OSP versus Reyes. How was that not a knockout finish for Reyes? Did Big Dan make the right call? In the moment, I will admit, I thought it was a knockout. I thought it was a walk-off knockout. What did you think, Marc?
Yeah, I thought it was a knockout. Certainly, probably should have been called that. But ultimately, it really doesn't matter all that much. Reyes was winning the fight. He dominated OSP. He won all 3 rounds. Thought he looked fantastic. Really, really excited about his future in the 205-pound division. We talked a lot about it last week, Shaun, that if he got the win over OSP, it will very well likely vault him into that mix at 205, which is very much in need of some new blood. And not only did he beat OSP, dominated him. It was really impressive. Very few people have done that to OSP, and I think Dominick Reyes is the real deal. Knockout decision, the guy is the real deal.
Yeah, that was one that you had even mentioned before in the lead up to the fight as one you were looking at that was maybe getting overlooked in all the craziness. But we've been asking for new blood at 205 for a long time, man. Excuse me. And Dominick Reyes is very impressive. He is super athletic. He is a new breed type of fighter. 4 straight fights in the UFC, and all of them have been impressive. Like, he almost got OSP out of there in the first round. And if he would have done that, that would have been 4 straight first-round stoppages at that point. 1 against Elvin St. Preux. I think we're talking about him probably a lot more than we would be, than we are, actually. But it is about time that 205-pound division gets restocked with new blood, just new, fresh challengers coming up. And I'm really excited about the future of Dominick Reyes. Again, he's a tall, athletic guy, very creative. Seems like he's kind of grown up in this game. Also, just, again, a very, I said it already, athletic, but he is a legitimate athlete. Whereas, maybe some of these guys are athletic, but they didn't have the credentials before them. Former football player, maybe in the same mold of OSP in that sense. But I am really excited about the future of Dominick Reyes. And in general, 205 all of a sudden is starting to get a little more new blood. We have Thiago Santos, Anthony Smith, Dominick Reyes. There are starting to finally be a few new names creeping up the pipe. And who knows, maybe that division could be hot in a few years.
Would be nice to see. Moving on to another McGregor-Khabib question, shocking. From Farah Puer, who fights like a dirty rat now? Conor. Grabs fence, grabs gloves, grabs shorts, illegal knee, relies on mind games. Khabib uses Sambo, wrestling, and BJJ.
Is that a question?
The question was, who fights like a dirty rat now?
I have a feeling people are taking great pleasure in the loss of one Conor McGregor. Since this isn't really a question, I will just comment.
Actually, no. It's that what's funny is they're actually not taking pleasure in it. They're sniping at the media. They just enjoy the win. enjoy the win for your boy Khabib. Yes, McGregor lost. He got his butt handed to him. It was a fairly one-sided victory. What's the problem here?
My one comment I will say about this comment, I think Herb Dean got very lucky that Khabib won that fight because Conor McGregor was getting away with a lot of fouls, man. A lot of fouls. And they were constant, they were omnipresent, and they were all sorts of fouls. They were whatever kind of foul you could have asked for. He was giving it throughout the course of that fight. If he ends up winning that fight, you don't think people are going to be talking about that? That would be one of the prevailing narratives of how much did he cheat to win that fight. I think Herb Dean got really lucky that Conor didn't win that fight because especially after what we just saw the previous a few weeks ago with Herb Dean and I think it was CB Dollaway, that would have been another one. And that would have been talked about ad nauseum, probably forever if Conor wins that fight. So he got lucky on that one.
Oh yeah, Conor was using every dirty trick in the book. I mean, every little thing to gain an advantage, he was looking for it. And it struck me as someone who knew, especially in the grappling, that maybe playing within the rules is not going to be enough here. Like you need to do something a little bit more to gain an advantage. And that's what McGregor was trying to do. He was trying to gain an advantage outside the rules, and Herb Dean was definitely not quick enough to put a kibosh on that. Ultimately, doesn't matter. Khabib won anyway. Doesn't matter how many fence grabs. Doesn't matter how many glove grabs. Doesn't matter how many shorts grabs. Khabib is just a dominant grappler, and McGregor had very, very little chance when Khabib got his hands on him. Stopped a few takedowns, but man, ultimately, that dude is a monster. That dude is a monster in the grappling. And McGregor, I mean, he's gonna need a weapon in there. Maybe he needs a dolly in the octagon next time to try to stop those Khabib takedowns against the cage because it wasn't working even with all the cheating that he was doing.
Let me ask you really quickly because I don't know that I've heard your take on this, and I'm curious whether you're on the right side of history. You want Tony
always on the right side of history, Shaun.
Well, let's not get too crazy. We have a couple instances with this UFC 230 saga where you've been on the wrong side. But
Diaz Poirier is not headlining, so
well, why you got to rub salt in the wound that fight's just not even happening now? Khabib versus Tony. Do you agree that this is the one that needs to happen next?
Yeah. Absolutely. So I want that fight so badly, man. Oh man. I cannot wait to see that fight. Now, I'm not sure that's what's going to happen. I think there is still a pretty good chance they're going to do the rematch, which I think is a horrible idea for the UFC and for McGregor. I think it's a great idea for Khabib. I don't know if Khabib wants it, but man, if he got that fight and he beats Conor again, gee, I mean, what can you say about the guy at that point? I do think that they could do the rematch again because it's just so. I mean, man, how many people are talking about this? Just people who don't care about fighting in my life have reached out to me, have talked to me about this. It's just a big freaking deal. I mean, it's everywhere you look. It's crossed over now into the mainstream, where I think last week it was obviously the biggest UFC story, the biggest MMA story. It became a big sports story, but now it's like TMZ, like the first thing on TMZ is Conor Khabib. And that means a lot. It's become a huge story. And I think Khabib's profile has gone through the roof. And we talked about last week, what will this victory do for Khabib? Well, the victory ends his flying double stomp off of the cage area there. Look, it was ugly. I mean, it was not great, but it's not going to be a black mark for the sport. It's going to make Khabib even more popular. That's just how these things go. It's just, I mean, I feel like he's like a modern day legend now in people's eyes, some people's eyes, not only because he whooped McGregor, but he had the audacity, the lunacy to jump out of the cage and jump right into McGregor's corner. 4 dudes, just him against 4 dudes. I mean, that is a set of cojones. I don't know how you say cojones in Russian, but my God, that man has them.
Would you say his balls was hot?
His balls was hot, my friend. His balls was hot. Yeah, I mean that dude is like a legend. Like he's gonna be looked at very differently from now on. He is a huge star, for better or for worse. Again, I'm not condoning igniting a riot, and thank God no one was hurt, and thank God no fans got involved or anything like that. It could have been way worse than what it was. It was ugly for what it was, but this is 2018. And when sometimes you do something crazy and something that may seem very horrible at the time, and a few days later, it's like that man is a goddamn legend.
Yeah, man. Now the more distance we got from it, I feel like I agree.
Even John Kavanaugh, like on Joe Rogan's show the other day, was like, "Oh, I understand what Khabib did. It's not a big deal."
Well, yeah, I mean, because also Team McGregor can't take the moral high ground when dudes out throwing dollies through buses. I will say,
Khabib had no weapon. Khabib went into Conor's team.
Khabib is a weapon.
Khabib is a human weapon.
Yeah. I will say though,
that's a bad man.
Just to add on to what you were saying, on Friday we were at weigh-ins and it was a crazy scene at weigh-ins, the official weigh-ins, the morning ones, and seeing Khabib and Tony both weigh in on the same day. It feels like we have been teased with this moment for so damn long, and we finally got it, and it didn't matter because they weren't fighting each other. But now that we know that it's like a possibility, it's a thing in my mind I know I've seen, so it can possibly happen. We need to see this fight, man. This is the fight. This is the fight. Maybe like not in terms of a broader landscape of, you know, public interest and people in the general world caring about it. Normal people who don't like watching dudes just mess each other up for a living. But for like us, for our world, for the MMA world, for just history, for the sports history, this is the fight for the lightweight division ever. I feel like the winner of that fight to me, and you know, we always talk about GOATs and who's the best of whatever all time. The sport is really in its infancy, so it's easy to have those conversations consistently because every week something new happens and maybe that changes the picture. But I genuinely feel when Khabib and Tony fight, hopefully it's next, the winner of that fight is the greatest lightweight we have ever seen. Both of their resumes are so obscenely better than everybody else at this point in this current era. And just even in terms of length of dominance, I need to see that fight so badly, man. I really want to see that fight. I hope that fight can happen. The winner of that fight has the absolute claim of being the best lightweight in the history of the sport. And I just want it to happen. I want it so bad.
Yeah, I want to see that very, very badly. Just as an aside, we literally, not the A side, an aside, we literally have people consecutively tweeting at us that we're biased for Khabib, that we're biased for Conor. We're biased for Khabib, that we're biased for Conor. Dudes, we're just calling it like we see it. You all are biased. You all have your favorites. We don't have our favorites. We're just talking. We're just talking. We're having a good time. We're answering your questions the way that we see it. So
the proper opinion is to have the opinion they have, Marc.
That's correct. That's correct.
Well, let's
because we literally have we've literally said good things about both men in the last. We've been talking for an hour already. Man, where's my Danny? Coffee.
You're never getting that coffee. Last question coming from the MMA Fighting page, and then we'll go over to Twitter. And we started late, so we'll go a little later today than we normally do. This is coming from Nick Diesel, and this is a really good question. I'm happy someone asked this. Aldo versus McGregor 2. He writes, I selfishly want more than 13 seconds of this matchup. Is this the fight to make post 229? I love that Aldo is taking his shot, but what brings Conor to the table? Man, as soon as I heard this, Aldo call for this, immediately that's the fight I want for Conor next. I know it will never happen. It will never, ever, ever happen because there's no upside to Conor at all. And that's all he looks for in these fights is what's in it for him. How can this increase his stock and his legacy? He can't top 13 seconds. But goddamn, Aldo Conor 2 at 155 would be so nice right now.
Danny didn't bring me coffee, but he brought me some H2O. So thanks, Danny. Appreciate it.
That's vodka.
It's not vodka. Wait, take this other cup. There's no room on this little orchestra stand. Come on, man.
This is excellent TV.
I know it's fantastic. So I'm on board. I'm on board with McGregor Aldo too. I think that there's a lot of good things about it. But how about this? How about Aldo versus Diaz as the co-main event of UFC 230, and the winner faces Conor McGregor? How about that?
I mean, that's nice, but Nate would ever do it.
Why not?
Why would Nate do that?
Because it's a big money fight at MSG against the former longtime featherweight champion who there's a story there. They both have stories with him.
You're talking like this is a sport where things matter. You know Nate Diaz. I don't think he would do that.
I don't know. I don't think he's definitely off that card.
I agree with that.
I think it's still a possibility he fights at MSG. I don't know who, but I think Aldo is a possibility.
Aldo Nate Diaz would be damn good. I would love to see how Nate Diaz deals with those leg kicks.
What I'm
How
saying.
Aldo deals with that length. That would be good.
That's what I'm saying. If that doesn't happen, the question of who McGregor fights next, both of those guys will be on that list, of course, Diaz and Aldo. So I could see maybe Diaz just saying, you know what, screw UFC 230. I'll just go fight McGregor next, and we'll do the trilogy sometime next year. It's a possibility.
Well, our own friend Ariel Helwani reporting now that Nate Diaz wants Khabib. So I'm sure
I did see that, but I think that we know that if the McGregor fight was available and the Khabib fight was available, I think Nate would probably still go for McGregor.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just don't see Conor ever revisiting the Aldo series because, again, how can he top himself? But if anybody deserves a rematch, it's the guy who maybe is still the featherweight GOAT. I would still love to see that. But let's hit Twitter.
Yeah.
Let's do this, Marc. Let's start rapid firing through some Twitter questions because we got a lot of them today.
A lot of questions.
You want me to go first while you do this?
No, I'll start. It's from DJ. McGregor throws bottles, 1.6 million buys. McGregor throws Dolly, say 2.6 million buys. What will he throw before his next fight, and what business will it do, especially if some of the Irish are turning on him?
Let's just go full out, right? Molotov cocktails. Let's just get crazy with it.
Hot balls. Moving
Hot
on.
balls.
Well, might as well be one of the many to ask this. Who should the UFC try to get to replace Poirier? Gaethje would probably be the most fun, but what about Diaz versus Aldo at lightweight for the Conor rematch belt? That's what I'm saying. So Shaun, other
who asked that question? You didn't even give him props.
Eric Holdell.
I don't like that you dismissively said Eric Holdell's name. I'm sure he's a lovely person.
So I mean, we talked about Diaz versus Aldo, but anyone else on that list that you like to see fight Diaz and MSG? That would be realistic that Diaz would actually want to fight.
That's two different questions because you could go up and down the lightweight rankings, and I would love to see Nate fight anybody. He's so picky and choosy. I don't know what the actual answer to that would be that he would want, that he would accept, unless it's something like a Dustin Poirier or a Conor McGregor or a Khabib Nurmagomedov. I feel like he's holding out for something really big. I don't know that he would take like a Kevin Lee or a Justin Gaethje or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know either. I don't think he would take a Kevin Lee. It would need to be someone who has like headline pay-per-views in the past. Poirier was not that guy, but Poirier was kind of strategic in that it gave him a path to a fight with Khabib or a fight with McGregor. I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's completely out of the question that Diaz fights, but it seems more and more like it's not going to happen. I still think it's a possibility. I don't think he's definitely off the card, but the question is who. The question is who is out there to do that fight that actually interests him. And people have asked, have McGregor come back and fight Diaz at MSG in 4 weeks. It's not going to happen, folks. If that fight happens and when it happens, there's going to be a much longer build for that. McGregor just came off the Khabib loss. He got beat up in that fight. That's not going to happen. But we'll see. We'll see with the next. I mean, it's going to have to happen in the next few days. Again, we're only 4 weeks out, so let's see what happens. I'm hoping Diaz stays on the card. It's a good card with or without him, but it would be nice to have him back.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let's move on. Next question coming from Twitter. This is coming from Chris YYZ Yeg. All right. He writes, with the UFC changing fights at will and throwing together last-second main events, do you predict this behavior will blow up in their face? Will fans get tired of the bullshit and move on?
I mean, there are different kinds of fans, right? I think that a lot of fans that listen to us and a lot of fans that are frequent visitors of MMAfighting.com and are the hardcore fans, I think a lot of them are already sick of this. I think that they are done. They are over it. They don't want to deal with this crap anymore. I think a lot of them like that Khabib went after Dylan Dennis and McGregor's corner because I think there's that talk shit, get hit sentiment among a lot of hardcore fans. So I think a lot of the hardcore fans are already over this. However, if you look at the UFC's pay-per-view buys this year, the hardcore fan base makes up maybe like 200,000 people in the States. Maybe fewer than that.
220. Sorry to talk over you, but 228 did less than 200,000.
Yeah,
it's like 180. So maybe
exactly.
less at this point.
So the hardcore fans that we talk to and that we answer questions from on a regular basis are really a vocal minority. If 2 point whatever million people watched and bought McGregor versus Khabib, that's a lot more people who are just casual fans who don't watch the UFC every week, who don't really know what's going on, and they're drawn in by all this craziness. And the rematch will do just and look, it'll probably happen. The rematch,
Don't do that, Mark. You're doing this again.
probably gonna happen.
You're doing this thing again where you put things out in the world and then you want them to happen. Don't do that, Mark.
I'm keeping it real.
No.
You
Need to project Ferguson Khabib into the world.
I told you I want Khabib Ferguson. That's the fight that I want to see. But I'm trying to be realistic and I'm trying to think the way the UFC does, and that's usually with the wallet, not the brain. It's all about the green. It's all about the cash. And my God, Khabib McGregor 2? Are you kidding me? I mean, that's the biggest story right now in the almost. I mean, I don't want to say in the world, but certainly it's one of the hottest stories in the mainstream media right now. And the second fight will do just enormous numbers. I mean, I didn't think that any UFC fight could approach like Mayweather numbers in boxing on pay-per-view. Khabib McGregor 2 could approach Mayweather numbers. I really believe that.
We just saw it. There would be no difference to it. I
would still sell it. People would still sell it.
No, I know. I hate that I agree with you.
Would buy it, I should say. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore, but it'll you know that it'll make a ton of money.
No, I know, and I hate that I agree with you. I just hope that if there's a way to get back to Khabib McGregor 2 without having to run it back right away, right? Let Khabib build his stock against Ferguson, let Conor fight Nate Diaz or something. If both of them win, then that's even bigger. And then you got something. I just hope it doesn't happen. I really don't want to see that again immediately. We know what the result is, man. That was not a competitive fight.
It was not a competitive. I mean, it was a comprehensive performance by Khabib. And if it happens again in 6 months, I have a hard time believing that the outcome would be any different. And that's why I agree. I think it would be disastrous for McGregor to do it again, except when it comes to the pocketbook. From a money perspective, yeah, you run that back and you make if he made almost 50 million for the first fight, he could make 60, 70 million for the second fight, almost approaching what he made in Maymac. I think it'll do that well. But it could also be the final fight in his career. If he loses 2 in a row to Khabib, where does he go from there?
That feels like that would be a death knell to whatever like sort of aura is around him, if it's already not gone, which it might be. But getting thoroughly dominated by Khabib multiple times, like this is something I said in the post-fight show, and it's something I've thought about a lot since. Because I've heard it from my friends too, who again are outside of this bubble, not caring about this sport. The only thing that they know about Conor now is that he's consistently losing these fights in the biggest fights, right? So these big, huge fights that draw all this crowd, he's lost 3 of them now. The Mayweather fight, the Diaz fight, and now this one. The only one that he's won that people really paid attention to, I guess, in terms of the top pay-per-views of all time, were the Diaz rematch and Alvarez. And I don't know that Alvarez maybe extended outside the bubble in that way. Aldo didn't breach 1 million. So like that was still kind of hardcore where that was. I don't know where I'm getting at. I'm kind of sputtering a little bit, but I feel like just generally the general consensus among the public now is that McGregor is losing these big fights. And I think at a certain point that hurts him.
Absolutely. No doubt. Let me just give a shout out to Alec. He was the one who asked about Diaz versus Aldo, and I neglected to say his name because I am very tired, and Danny still has not brought me any coffee. So blame Daniel Segura for that.
All right.
Let's move on to another Twitter question from Diddy Boop or Diddy Bop or something of that ilk. From Twitter, Brian Ortega is big for 145. Am I crazy to think outside of Tony Ferguson, he's the best stylistic matchup to give Khabib a run for his money? Let me just say one thing before you answer, Shaun. Brian Ortega was actually backstage at UFC 229 on Saturday, and he did say if he wins the 145-pound belt from Max Holloway, he wants to go up to 155 next.
Lord, I would watch that. # would watch. Goodness gracious. He's not a small man. He certainly cuts a decent amount to get to featherweight. I would like to see it. I think that him and his submissions, it just is generally savant level submission game. It's similar to the Ferguson fight, where obviously that's not what Ferguson's strength is, but just being good off your back, man. Being good off your back, being good in uncomfortable positions, grappling, being good in scrambles, being able to just handle that, whatever that drowning feeling is. Anybody who can handle that, I want to see them fight Khabib, because that's just so fascinating on so many levels. I would love to see Ortega versus Khabib. I think it would be a crazy matchup. Habib would probably have a decent amount of weight on him by the time they reach the cage, unless Ortega buffed up a little bit. He'd probably have like 10, 20 pounds on him. But that would be a fascinating thing to watch.
I would love to see that fight, of course, but let's just let the lightweight division play itself out, though. I would prefer to see Ortega for the time being if he were to beat Holloway, which is certainly that's certainly no guarantee. That's going to be a very tough fight at UFC 231 in December. Let's let him stay at 145 for now, because we still have so many people and so many situations to hash out at 155. I mean, Justin Gaethje is still hanging around. We still have Tony Ferguson, who obviously is the guy right now. What has he won? 11 in a row? I mean, the guy is on an incredible
11 in a row in the deepest division in the world.
I mean, it's ridiculous. He's got to be the guy next. So as much as I'd like to see Ortega fight Khabib, there are still things that need to happen at 155 first before we can start talking about 45ers coming up.
Yeah, I just to add on to your point, something I noticed this morning just while we were like prepping for the show, this stat blew me away, and I don't know why, because it's not even like a crazy stat, but that Saturday night was the first defense of the UFC lightweight titles, first successful defense of the UFC lightweight title. Since when? Do you know the answer to this?
I think I saw you tweet it.
Yeah,
so I'll let you.
Since December 2015, 3 years ago, when RDA beat Donald Cerrone. That feels like a lifetime ago, man.
That's crazy.
That is so telling of where we have been as a sport and where this division has been and just everything. That blew my mind when I realized that.
Literally a whole different era of the division, and it wasn't that long ago, but it seems like a million years ago.
Yeah, 3 years, man. Let's keep it going on Twitter. Next one's coming from Alex Buendia. I hope I said that right. He writes, with UFC 230 looking more complete, have you guys heard anything about Liddell versus Ortiz 3, the massive Liddell Ortiz 3 fight that's coming up? It's a little over 6 weeks away, and that's the only fight announced for the card. Will the card actually have the usual 12, 13 fights like a UFC card, or is it probably just going to have 5 or 6?
I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know what's going on. I think they'll obviously add some fights to the bill. I think Gleason
Tebow is on that card, right?
He had said he was, and I think Tom Lawler had said that he was being. I don't think anything's official. I haven't seen any actual fights. I've heard that some people might be on it, but I don't think we're gonna get what MMA fans and what specifically UFC fans have kind of expected as like a stacked card. I don't think it's gonna be any other big name fights. For the Golden Boy MMA card, I think it's going to be Liddell and Ortiz, and it's going to be like a boxing card. It's going to be like with the one big main event and some lesser known individuals on the undercard. But yeah, time is ticking. Time is ticking on this card. It's November 24th at the Forum in LA, and outside of that one press conference with Tito and Chuck in Vegas the week of Canelo against Triple G, have not heard much from those guys either. Really, it's on social media here and there. So. Which, by the way, MMA Fighting wasn't even invited to that press conference, so I'm not really sure how they're trying to get the word out about this fight. It would be nice to invite the biggest MMA site in the world if you're trying to promote an MMA fight. That's all I'm saying. But yeah, I don't know much about what's going on with the undercard. They've been very quiet over there, and maybe this is just what they do in boxing. I don't know. I'm not. We don't cover boxing, so I'm not as honed in on what they do. But maybe this is just how it comes together in boxing.
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing in general with the promotion of that fight. I've already said it at length on this show, so I won't go into it. But doing a boxing style press conference for that matchup in particular with Tito Ortiz and Chuck Liddell. First of all, MMA fans don't want a boxing style press conference. Boxing style press conference is trash. It's straight trash. No one cares about what the managers and the promoters have to say. They just want to see those guys go back and forth. No one wants to see a prepared Tito Ortiz statement. I just want to see him spar with Chuck Liddell verbally, and we got none of that. So I don't know what they're doing with that. As you said, I don't know really how they're promoting this in a way that MMA fans are used to and enjoy. So I guess we still got some time though, so we'll see.
You're really reaching for them grapes, Shaun. You know that?
Starting to sound like wine.
You're really reaching for them grapes.
Some cheese in that wine. It's just too good. Let's start wrapping up. We got a few more. You're in New York, so this is a good one. Where'd it go? I lost it. Oh, this is coming from Blake on Twitter, who asks, are we finally going to get the great Marc Raimondi on the MMA beat this week?
That's not a real question. Come on, ask a real question. No, I mean, and Blake, yeah, I appreciate that very much. Thank you. That makes me feel good because if you look at my Twitter mentions right now, it's a goddamn disaster. So thank you for that.
I was just trying to make you feel good. I was trying to give you a little pick me up.
I will not be on the MMA beat this week because it coincides with the Bellator 208 press conference in New York. It's about the same time, so I can't make it, but there will be a beat tomorrow with the usual cast of characters. So tune in for that, and then watch our coverage of the Bellator press conference. I guess before and after. We'll be here all week. Esther, Lynn, and Casey Leiden are also in town with me in New York, so gonna be full coverage. Of course, Danny, who by the way, I still haven't gotten that coffee. He's gonna be around. Chuck Mindenhall is gonna be with me today, hopefully, and tomorrow. So it'll be fun. All
right. Well, hey, let's get one more actual question, real question, before we get out of here. This comes from.
We're leaving already. It's early.
Do you want to keep going?
Let's keep going. If we got questions, let's keep going.
All right. Hey, we'll keep it rolling. This is coming from Chris on Twitter, who writes, with the recent turmoil between the UFC and the fighters, should we expect more big names as well as prospects to look to Bellator as a more viable option? This is a good question.
I mean, I think Bellator is a more viable option in many ways, and I think that you've seen it. But ultimately, I still feel like if the UFC really, really wants a fighter, they're going to pull out all the stops and get that fighter back. And I think that as good as Mousasi and McDonald are, I feel like the UFC didn't try as hard as they possibly could to get them back. And I think that's wrong. I think they made a huge mistake because that Bellator card from a few weeks ago in San Jose, boy, it feels like a million years ago now. But that was a really, really good card, and it really showed the growth of Bellator. And I think this weekend will as well. But I think Bellator is a viable option. I think it's good to have another promotion out there that's willing to pay fighters a decent amount of money. So at least it's helpful for fighters. At least, when they're free agents, they can go on the open market and hopefully get paid. The Eddie Alvarez situation is kind of one that is worth watching right now to see where it goes. Scott Coker told me a few weeks ago that Alvarez is probably not going to Bellator. Doesn't seem like that worked out. But yeah, I mean, I think that I don't know if necessarily all the stuff that's going on with the UFC in terms of that is affecting things. I think it's just that Bellator is willing to pay the money. I think that's really the biggest part of it.
Yeah, I will say though, as the one aspect of this that would be interesting to me is if you're a young prospect coming up in the game, someone who's just starting out, maybe you have great credentials coming from wrestling or boxing or wherever, I would take a deep look at Bellator, man, because going along the Aaron Pico route, the Ed Ruth route, the Darian Caldwell route, all these things they've done for these young guys and sort of grooming them, they groom fighters in a way that the UFC certainly does not. They'll let you get your feet wet, get these fights, maybe not Aaron Pico because he's an exception, but get these fights on these undercards with these dark matches where maybe nobody's watching and you can figure out, get your sea legs in the cage and slowly get used to this game and take those incremental steps up. Also just give you favorable matchmaking where each one will be a little bit harder than the next one, but still something manageable. Ed Ruth has taken this path in Bellator, and right now Ed Ruth might be a legitimate great welterweight. We're about to find out in this tournament. But if I'm a young guy, man, I am going that route rather than getting thrown to the sharks in the UFC and having to be one of 1,000 lightweights or one of a billion welterweights that they have and just a face in the crowd, where you got a guy like Vicente Luque, who I can't remember what his streak's at this point, but he's like 7-1 or something like that with all of those being stoppages, and he's not even sniffing a top 15 matchup. If I'm a young guy, man, I am taking a deep, hard look at Bellator and really what they can do for your career, because also you got to think it's not going to last forever, right? Like, so if you're an Aaron Pico or Ed Ruth or wherever, and your contract runs out, at this point, you're positioned to get a sweet deal from the UFC if you are attractive enough for them, if you're actually good enough. So this is a very excellent way to get your sea legs, really get your footing in this game, and then actually make some good money, because the MMA is just the same as life anywhere else, right? Like the way you get the biggest pay raises in life is if some other place is coming and trying to get you. And that's just how life works. If someone else is bidding for your services and you can kind of create a bidding war, that's how you're going to get paid the most. If I'm like I said, a young guy coming up like an Ed Ruth or a Pico, I'm taking a look at Bellator.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I like what they're doing with Pico a lot. And we talked about it, but man, that guy is going to be good. And the people that are saying that he can't be a star in Bellator, totally disagree with that. I totally disagree. Ronda Rousey was already becoming a big star in Strikeforce before the UFC obviously bought Strikeforce and they co-opted Rousey and they made her the UFC Women's Bantamweight Champion. She was already becoming a big star in Strikeforce. You can be a big star in the second organization if you do it right. If you're big enough, it really depends on the person. And I think that Pico can be that person for Bellator.
Yeah. All right. What's left? Where are you hitting me with?
More questions. Do you want to look at the pound for pound, the new pound for pound rankings? UFC.
Sure.
Ready? Number 1, Daniel Cormier. This is from Salvatore Zulo asking us about the new pound for pound rankings. Pound for pound rankings. Number 1, Daniel Cormier. Number 2, Khabib Nurmagomedov. Khabib Abdulmanapovich Nurmagomedov. That's his name.
Nice.
TJ Dillashaw, Max Holloway, George St. Pierre. 6 is Woodley. 7 is Demetrius Johnson. 8 is Conor McGregor. 9 is Stipe Miocic. Tied for 9 is Henry Cejudo. 11 is Chris Cyborg. 12 is Robert Whittaker. 13 is Tony Ferguson. 14 is Amanda Nunes. And 15 is Rose Namajunas.
Okay, so let's look at the top 5 here because rather than look at everything. So DC, Khabib, TJ, Max, GSP. That feels right. And also, man, look at AKA, top 2 spots right there with DC.
That's what jumped out to me right away, AKA representing. And, if Cain Velasquez was healthy, he'd be on this list as well.
Yeah. Ultimately, I don't, it's a pound for pound list are so flipping. I can't really get mad about any of this, but that top 5 seems like a healthy top 5 to me. DC, Khabib, TJ, Max, GSP, all of them. Maybe you could get Tyron in there. But other than that, feels right.
I'd put Woodley somewhere in that top 5 because
who would you take? So who would you take out to put Woodley in
there? Maybe GSP because he hasn't fought in a year now.
Yeah, I could see that.
And maybe Holloway because he also. I'd probably put Woodley at 3 or 4. Honestly, I would because Dillashaw only has the 1 consecutive title defense and it was against the guy that he beat for the belts. So I'd probably put Woodley 3 behind Cormier, Nurmagomedov, and I'd put before Dillashaw. Also very interesting, talking about a lot of wrestlers. Cormier, Nurmagomedov. Dillashaw obviously is known for his striking, but he was a college wrestler, Division I. GSP, great wrestling. Woodley, great wrestling. DJ, great wrestling. It's interesting to see where the best fighters are and their style.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up here for us. You want to do your promo or me?
You can go for it because I'm spent.
You got a whole week of coverage. You need to bring the people. You can't be spent yet.
I know, but I gotta conserve my energy because I have to run to Bellator in about 90 minutes. So,
all right. Well, hey, I'll keep mine short today because we did talk a lot. And I know we've talked a lot about the 165-pound division over the past several weeks. So I think it's pretty clear, like people know where we stand on it. We both want it. I also think it's pretty clear, especially after this past week, UFC wants no part of it. Dana White, the matchmakers, it seems pretty obvious that no one wants a part of it in the UFC. And I know part of that, at least part of their thinking with that, is that it effectively destroys what is a legacy division at 170 pounds. That is one of their all-time divisions. They've had that division basically forever. There are a lot of all-time greats have been in that division. But I think, what maybe be the best idea that I have ever seen in regards to this 165-pound division and the legacy-ness of 170. And it came yesterday from one Michael Chiesa, new UFC welterweight, who would benefit from this 165-pound division. I'm going to put on my fantasy matchmaker hat for a second here and slip into perfect Shaun world because this idea would never happen. It'll never happen. But Chiesa's idea was too good not to share. So I need to share it a little bit. He proposed that we make GSP versus Tyron Woodley as the last 170-pound fight ever. The old versus the new, the ultimate legacy versus the the Ultimate Legacy fight, basically for the division. The winner gets forever GOAT status. And you end on a high note, and then you can kind of spread the talent out over the two divisions. I love that idea, man. That is a really cool idea, and that's a way that I've never really thought of it. The way it could be built could totally be massive if given the proper promotion, right? The history of 170 pounds, going over the history, dissecting it, the greatest moments in the divisions, basically just like making it a giant tribute to 170, which really is, as Dana White always says, a legacy division. If built correctly, I think that could be huge. Could perfectly set up the two new divisions of 65 and 75 in a way that would be easily understood, digestible to the casual fan. And, maybe not thrown together last second like the Nate and Dustin thing would have been. Personally, I love it. I have never, ever been into Woodley GSP. I never really saw the upside for GSP, but this is one of my favorite ideas I've heard in a long time. So shout out to Michael Chiesa. That was good stuff.
I like it. I'm down. I don't have a lot to say, but I do want to talk about the Nevada Athletic Commission. They, of course, said on Monday, I guess, and I barely know what day it is at this point, but they said that not only will Khabib Nurmagomedov be facing a complaint, so will Conor McGregor. So both of them are facing some kind of discipline from the commission coming up here in the next few weeks and months. And I'm just gonna say one thing: exercise some leniency. Let's not put these guys out for any kind of long period of time. And I'm talking about Khabib and McGregor. Now, I know the whole Conor to the first punch thing, and maybe he will still get some kind of suspension or some kind of fine, some kind of discipline. I think that'll probably happen. I think probably it's going to be more of a fine. I can see both getting a steep fine because they got to collect that money. But I'm going to say, suspension-wise, no one wants to see Nurmagomedov be out for a year. No one wants to see McGregor out for a year. I think that it was contained very well. I think that no one got hurt unnecessarily, thank God, and that's a good thing. Certainly, there were things that happened that were not good, and cooler heads did not prevail in the moment, and crazy things happened, and whatever. We all saw the whole situation, but it's done now. Let's move on. I know the NSAC is going to take their money, but no crazy suspensions, no crazy discipline. Let's get these guys back to fighting. It's not. And it's not a black mark on the sport. It's not. I've done some radio interviews, and I've been arguing with some people on the radio who maybe not cover MMA on a regular basis. It's really not going to hurt the sport at all. It's going to bring more eyes to the sport. But the honest truth is that people who don't watch MMA don't exactly have the greatest opinion of MMA. It's people fighting inside of a cage. That's what it is. It's not. This is not. These are not saints in there. These are not. Schoolboys. These are choir boys. These are fighters, and things do go down. Not to sound all Gus Johnson, but things do happen once in a while. So leniency, and no, there's no black mark against the sport, and I think that's really all I want to say about it. It's been like a swirl of information over the last few days, and I think I've seen what happened from every angle imaginable. I can't actually believe there were so many damn angles from fans that I hadn't even seen before, and now I'm just seeing some like yesterday for the first time. It's completely crazy, and I hope also, last point, that it's not just the brawl that people talk about. And yes, I think that Khabib did start the brawl, and it was unfortunate. Maybe McGregor escalated the brawl. That's fine, but I hope people also remember what Khabib did in the cage, not outside the cage. The flying double stomp was whatever it was, and it's all the memes now if you see. But I hope people remember that the dude had an incredible performance in the cage, and he very well might be the greatest lightweight of all time. Very well might be one of the best fighters in the world. He is one of the best fighters in the world. He very well might be the best fighter in the world, pound for pound, right now. So please keep that in mind, outside of all the drama, outside of all the BS, just how damn good Khabib Nurmagomedov is. And again, no year suspension, please. Keep that short. Sure, take a little bit of their purse, but don't go too crazy with that either. And now let's move on to bigger and better things and put all this behind us.
Also, let me say, give Khabib his purse back. It's $2 million. I don't know why the NAC.
He'll get it back. He's gonna get it back. I think
I understand,
but
I know. Just don't give the man his purse back. It's $2 million. You guys don't. That's not your purse. You don't get to hold that purse indefinitely.
Absolutely, and he will get it back. And I'm most likely Khabib is making far more than $2 million. for that card. So it's just $2 million is like the guaranteed purse that the UFC reports to the commission. But hopefully he's making way more money for that. And hopefully he's making a good deal. And hopefully if they do a rematch, he'll make even more. And hopefully no one gets into any kind of brawls outside the cage in the rematch and things and cooler heads prevail. And it's more of an I want to say more of a sport, but I think that ship has already sailed.
I'm gonna stop you right there. There's no way on earth I'm gonna let you end our show with you saying hopefully they do a rematch.
No, I said hopefully there's no brawl if they do a rematch. Not hopefully they do a rematch. You know they're gonna do a rematch, Shaun. You know they're gonna do a rematch.
I know, but we don't need it immediately. We don't need to put it out there.
We don't need it immediately.
We'll
do McGregor versus Mayweather too in the meantime, because I know you love that so much.
Oh my God, I will reach through this computer and slap you Stockton style, Marc. Well, hey, that about wraps it up for us. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Wonderful questions today. Sorry again for being late, but I hope we made up for it by answering a lot. Keep it locked to MMA fighting, man. Marc, Raimondi, and the whole team over there, Esther, Casey, you guys are gonna be killing it all week in Bellator. I don't know how you're gonna survive it. I hope you're alive by the end of the weekend, Marc. It's been a crazy.
This is 4 weeks straight on the road. I don't want to complain. I know this is a great job and all, but I'm coffee. Danny, where is my coffee?
And with that, this has been another episode of the A-Side Live Chat Podcast. A replay of this is going to come up on YouTube almost immediately. SoundCloud, Stitcher, audio versions, those are going to come up later today. We will tweet those out. In the meantime, keep it locked to MMA fighting all week for all the Bellator goodness. And that same time, same place next week, Wednesday morning, we will be here, the A-Side Live Chat Podcast. For Shaun Al-Shatti, Marc Raimondi, thank you guys so much once again for joining us. We love every one of you. We'll see you next week.
Peace.